Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've got a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with a couple of TV personalities that were quite familiar to viewers in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we're going to begin with Mike Connors, who died recently at the age of 91. Mike Connors was a nice Armenian boy from Fresno, that Armenian community there. He was born Cracker-Ohanian, and he went on to symbolize, probably better than anybody, the changing role of the detective on television in its early days. His story's pretty interesting. He went to the Army Air Force and he came out, and on the GI Bill he went to UCLA and was actually a basketball player, which meant he played for the great John Wooden, the Wizard of Westwood. I'm not sure how good a basketball player he was, although he acquired the name Touch. He was Touch Connors in most of his early roles on television and movies, so maybe he was a pretty good shooter, I don't know. But one day on the court, William Wellman, the great director, was watching a game and saw that Mike Connors was a good-looking guy with a good expression, and he offered him a contract at Goldwyn, although it turned out later he was simply negotiating with Farley Granger, who was giving the studio a hard time, and they thought that they could use Touch Connors' contract as a negotiating tool with Granger. Now, the interesting thing is his first role as Touch Connors, he was in a movie called Sudden Fear that starred Jack Palance and Joan Crawford, and it is a great movie. You should check that one out. It's a hidden gem. He plays a junior lawyer who's trying to get into Gloria Graham's pants the whole movie, but it's a decent role and a great movie. After that, he did a bunch of Drek on television, B-movies. For about 7 years, he changed his name to Mike from Touch, and in 1959 he got a role as one of the last noir detectives in a television show. In the late 50s, detective shows were still these noir dramas that came out of radio in the 40s, the Sam Spade type characters, guys like Peter Gunn and Richard Diamond. But since everything was moving to Hollywood, it's easier to do them in the light than the dark. So the detectives were still tough guys, but they were tough guys in a more bright environment. And in 1959, Mike Connors played the lead, Nick Stone, in a good but short-lived detective series called Tightrope. Here he is in a brief snippet. You notice he does the narration, just like the Philip Marlowe characters of Raymond Chandler.
Headquarters had reserved the seat next to Teresa Barron for me. During the flight, I got acquainted with Teresa. It was hard to believe that she was the daughter of Vince Barron. She was educated, poised, and gentle, a lovely, charming girl. Yet there was something tragic about her, the tragedy of something she had carried since birth, the stigma of her father's name.
I think I'd better phone home first.
We haven't got all day. Get in the car.
Something wrong, Miss Barron?
I'll say it once. Beat it.
No, nothing's wrong.
Beat it.
You said it twice. You step out of that car and I'll knock you right back in again.
You see, he's still got the hard-boiled tough guy pattern. Mike Connors was actually a frustrated song and dance man, so for most of the next decade he was looking for those kind of roles, and he was friends with Lucy, and she was helping him try and get some, but he really didn't make it like that. And in 1967, he got his signature role as a new kind of detective. Hopped-up jazzy score, hopped-up sports car, hip clothes. He was Joe Mannix in Mannix. Here's the opening theme to Mannix by Lalo Schifrin, and this is maybe his second best opening theme next to Mission Impossible. Theme just screams late 60s, early 70s. Mannix was an extremely successful show. That was Mike Connors' opus magnum. It ran for 8 years, and in the second year they took on Gail Fisher, who became only the second African-American woman to have a regular co-starring role in a series, after Nichelle Nichols in Star Trek. She wasn't just a secretary, she'd go undercover and help him solve crimes. Anyway, Mannix was sort of the precursor to Jim Rockford. Just like Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe, he was always getting in trouble with the police while he was trying to break open the case. Here's an example.
You the young lady who called?
Yes, sir.
What's the problem?
This gentleman said he was an artist and asked me over to model for him. And when I found out he wasn't interested in painting, I tried to leave and he wouldn't let me.
You've pulled some beauties, Mannix, but this one tops them all. Why?
Protective custody, Lieutenant.
You know, they got places for guys like you, Mannix. You want to look at pretty girls. You go down there with a camera. They don't even care if you got film. Let's go, miss.
Wait a minute, Lieutenant. Now, this girl's in danger. Yeah, she's mixed up in some kind of art forgery.
Oh. Attempted murder? Art forgery? No arson?
I'm on the level, Lieutenant.
Okay, Mannix, you want to tell me about the case?
You know I can't do that. Now, at least give this girl some protection.
You want protection, miss?
Only from him.
You heard the lady.
Yeah, but I didn't hear what charges she's preferring against me. After all, I did hold her here against her will.
You're asking for charges? What's that going to buy you? Her address. She'll have to give it if she...
Oh, if you don't mind, I'd just as soon forget about the whole thing. After all, there was no harm done. It happens every day.
In 1964, between Tightrope and Mannix, Mike Connor starred in an episode of Perry Mason called The Case of the Bullied Bowler. So he starred with Raymond Burr, and he also starred with our next subject, Barbara Hale, who died recently at the age of 94, and she was famous for one role. She was Perry Mason's secretary, Della Street. Della was always on the ball.
This is all I could find, Chief.
If it isn't a nose, Della, we better drop it. This is my secretary, Della Street, Miss...
Chalane, Frances Chalane. Hello.
Miss Street likes to maintain an air of formality in the office.
Not only was she on the ball, but she'd stay all hours for Perry.
Della, hey, come on, girl. It's midnight. Time you quit working.
Midnight? Why don't we just stay till tomorrow?
Union rules? Now, come on, rise and shine. I just gave up.
It's your own fault. You shouldn't be fooling around with wills and sulky heiresses anyway. Your specialty is murder.
And, of course, they always want you to think there might be something between Della and Perry, but Barbara Hale clears that up when she talks about Earl Stanley Gardner, the creator of Perry Mason.
Mr. Gardner, he thought himself as Ray Burr. And so when he hired Raymond, Raymond became his image. And Della, he was going with his secretary, and he's married to a Catholic woman. And was very good to her, but they could not get a divorce. But he was also going with his secretary. I was his secretary. Bad girl. So he was so cute. If I would do something that he didn't approve of, such as sitting on Raymond's desk, I thought it'd be kind of nice if I just sat on the edge of his desk and talked to him in one scene. The next day, I was called over. They said, we got to do it again, Barb. I said, why? It looked very natural. It felt good. Mr. Gardner wouldn't allow his secretary to sit on his desk.
Little Barbara Hale trivia for you. She was married to a cowboy actor named Bill Williams at RKO, and his real name was William Catt. Played Kit Carson on an early television series. Every once in a while, they'd throw him on an episode of Perry Mason. Barbara Hale and he had a son who took his father's name, William Catt, good-looking boy. And he made his name as Sissy Spacek and Amy Irving's boyfriend in Carrie, and then later on The Greatest American Hero. To close on Barbara Hale, I gotta play a little bit of Park Street Beat, the famous Perry Mason theme by Fred Steiner, whose podcast we've done. We're going to move on to our feature now. John Hurt, who died recently at the age of 77, and I'm going to upset some people with this, but John Hurt, in my opinion, was the greatest actor of our generation. I know you got your Robert De Niro and Jack Nicholson fans. John Hurt was every bit as good in movies as those guys were. He was more versatile for a longer period of time, and he was tremendous on television and on the stage as well, which those guys were not. People don't think of him as the actor those guys were because he was more versatile. He wasn't always the star, and he was British. But you look at his body of work, and it far surpasses theirs, or in my opinion, anybody else's of our generation. Ironically, most Americans may know him more for this role than any other, and he doesn't even get to show off his acting.
First thing that I'm going to do when I get back is to get some decent food.
That's an alien. Of course, what happens right after that? The alien pops out of his stomach. Of course, he did a parody of that role in Spaceballs. But let's look at some of his great roles, and this is only a partial list. John Hurt was turning out great roles for 55 years. De Niro and Nicholson at their best were good for, what, 2 decades? Here he is as Control in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
You did all you could, Percy. I know that it is one of 5 men. All I want from you is one code name. Trust no one, Jim, especially not in the mainstream. There's a rotten apple, Jim, and we have to find it.
Here he is as Winston Smith in 1984.
Freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 = 4. To an age when thought is free, from the age of Big Brother, from the age of the thought police. You know, the only thing to do is to walk out of here before it's too late.
You want Harry Potter? He could do Harry Potter.
I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter. Seems only yesterday that your mother and father were in here buying their first one.
chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. That much has always been clear to those of us who have studied wand lore.
It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. After all, he who must not be named did great things.
As I said, he did television, primarily British. Here he is in I, Claudius.
Gentlemen, I stand before you now as your emperor. He killed my mother and my brothers, your descendants. Should I not avenge them, even at the risk of being shunned by all men as a parasite?
One of my favorites was his role in Midnight Express, where he's barely recognizable as one of Brad Davis's co-prisoners.
Catch the Midnight Express.
What's that?
Go through the wall.
Best thing to do is to get your ass out of here. For them that hides in find, says I.
And what many people consider his greatest role, he's nominated for the Academy Award. He lost to De Niro in Raging Bull, and as good as De Niro was, I'm not sure that John Hurt wasn't even better in The Elephant Man.
You can't speak.
Based on the real-life experiences of Joseph Merrick, Hurt plays a man whose life is shaped by his physical disfigurement.
It's something that I've been meaning to ask you for some time now.
What's that?
Can you cure?
While working at a freak show,
People are frightened by what they don't understand.
Merrick is befriended by a physician from London Hospital.
I am not an animal. I am a human being.
And finally, the role that John Hurt thought was his best, and I agree, as the osteopath Stephen Ward talking to John Profumo, Ian McKellen, in Scandal about the Profumo affair, which we've covered in a podcast.
There was a letter, a note.
I know.
Silly old man.
Yes, it was rather. I'll see if I can get it back if you like.
Oh, there was nothing in it. I've nothing to hide.
Come off it, Jack. We all have something to hide. What a rum life it would be if we didn't.
Laurence Olivier once told John Hurt that when it comes to your obituary, they're only going to mention 2 or 3 performances, the ones that defined you early on. I tried not to do that. I agree with David Lynch. He was the greatest actor of our generation. Let's hear him recite Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky.
'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogroves and the mome raths outgrave. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jub-jub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal blade in hand, long time the Manx own foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood awhile in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. Oh, hast thou slain the jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, rapturous day, Canute, they chortled in his jaw. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome raths outgrave.
Nicholson and De Niro can't do that. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. And we're going to close tonight with John Wetton, who died recently at the age of 67, the bassist for King Crimson, but he made his fame as the songwriter and singer for Asia, one of the first 80s supergroups. So I'm going to play my 2 favorite Asia songs. First, their biggest hit, Heat of the Moment.
I never meant to be so bad to you. One thing I said that I would never do. A look from you and I would fall from grace. And that would wipe the smile right from my face. It was the heat of the moment. Telling me what I meant. The heat of the moment. Showing you all.
But as a final tribute to John Wetton, my favorite Asia song, wore this one out in 1982, Only Time Will Tell.
The thing is sure, but time will tell if you were wrong. Why is ring around the moon? Talking when I die. You're